Excellent. Thank you, Taylor. Hello, everyone. Met a couple of you already in the breakout room. Excited to be here and talk to you about the web design and AI and how they're connected. Just a quick check. Do you see the screen and can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. And by the way, this may not necessarily be monologue, but rather a dialogue. So feel free to jump in with a Q&A before even the session. We either touch them in the Q&A section or we'll address them straight ahead. So my name is Ilya Ozerets. I've been in the computer science world for quite some time, probably more than 15 to 20 years, depending how you count. I've been helping connecting the dots. I'm an engineer by education, transitioned into the business, and pretty much been developing, integrating technologies, software systems, and helping companies to get funding on their technology products or platforms and launching them all the way through the acquisition. So recently, we brought the idea R&D company from the ground up, bootstrapped it, launched the product, raised capital, and then went through the acquisition by Mytech Systems, and then been integrating that business into the Mytech Systems, which is publicly traded company in identity and fraud prevention space. Okay. Prior to that, and in parallel, I help entrepreneurs and companies set up and achieve their goals, be that setting up the roadmap, launching the product, or even making a decision to develop the product. In majority of the cases, that may not be the right time. Rather, you go and validate the idea. And here, throughout that time and tenor, network was building up and reaching out to me and helping. Hey, can we help with this problem or with this opportunity? And hence, the Install and Build Choice was formed as a smaller teams to help those entrepreneurs or companies with the specific tasks, be that development of the product, software or websites, maintaining them, or helping integrate new technologies, and just assessment of existing state. So that's a little bit about me. Happy to dive deeper, but my expertise from computer science world is quite deep in certain domains. I was speaking in different forums, various subjects, more lately in authentication, biometrics, and fraud prevention themes. Now, what today customers are actually, or clients expect, right? Just overall in general, no matter what product or solution is getting developed or sold, they're expecting fast answers. They do expect the polished and seamless experience. And we're talking not only actually about the digital experience, but overall consumer interactions. Be that a digital product or physical product, nowadays you pretty much go online and you carry the smartphone or the tablet and laptop or all of the above with you. And we, as actual customers, we do expect seamless experience no matter how technology will work. Nobody cares, right? I click the button, I talk to things, and I do expect the outcome straight ahead. So, and at the same time, we would like to ensure that whoever we're interacting with, the company, we actually have a trust, right? We want to believe that this is the organization and working in a good faith. And from the short break, one of the listeners here and participants already, unfortunately experiencing the things that fraudsters are actually using the technology to unfortunately do the fraud, right? There is always cat and the mouse game. A lot of companies are helping consumers and companies fight the fraud, but unfortunately, that's not 100% protected for everyone involved. Now, the problem for smaller teams, right? Larger organizations will have internal technical resources, design resources, ML resources, and others to actually, work on variety of different initiatives. Now, smaller teams also have big ambitions, but they also have lean teams. Typically, they're very resource constrained, meaning they don't necessarily have enough headcount to cover certain things. And you probably all of you experienced or experiencing that in your current role or whatever you're doing, right? And at the same time, there is always limited time. So the interesting part about that, not every organization or the teams will assess whether they're built from the ground up to support very fast growth and the changes that needs to happen. So their infrastructure is not may not be ready to scale actual trust, to follow up on the promises that they've done, and to convert those experiences fast, right? So today I'll cover what could be done and share at the end the checklist that you can run yourself through and think about all of those points that could help you set up the infrastructure and prepare you to enable the growing technologies. And here's the buzzword AI, but there are a lot of tools that you could actually plug in to enable your customers find you, to help with the different processes, to automate them, or to augment existing processes. Some of you mentioned about the go-to-market, so we'll touch about the few tools that we typically implement, even though we're very agnostic on the tool sets. However, we do have some that's pretty much close to plug and play, don't necessarily require you having the deep domain expertise. And with all of the AI tools that we'll be talking about, and generally about deploying any new technology within the processes, even though the promise of large language models and natural language interface is like everybody can use it, when you think about it, in order to use those different tools, you have to understand the domain, or you can learn from the tool, right? Because without the domain knowledge, you would not be able to interpret the answer from the tool. You can ask it to help you understand what it does, what it tells, what it could do. But to use those effectively and efficient, you need to be expert in the field. So what we're going to talk about is the lean AI stack, meaning you don't necessarily have to have teams, right? One team who is focused on the cold outreach, or there's an internal and outgoing marketing campaigns, right? How do you ensure that you find leads in automated manner and at the same time they find you? And then how do you qualify them and run through the whole process, and what tools could help you within the process, within those processes, right? This is an example. It doesn't necessarily, have to go only to those tools. By the way, we're not associated with any of them. It's just as an example of recent deployments where certain companies are either launching the product or we are revamping for the growth and scale. And they're looking into, there's a lot of, buzz around. You can just automate your cold outreach, or you can automate content creation, or you can just automate everything, right? In reality, you actually need to establish the infrastructure, which we talked about the website, because that's your digital store, digital front of the business. It's not going anywhere. All of the different scrappers or the new search capabilities are still looking for the information in order to present it to the customer who is requesting that information. So that has to be fixed. But if we're talking about certain go-to-market processes that needs to be also connected, we typically use Clay and Apollo. There are others that could be used for the same purposes, but you want to have the lead information being up to date and correct, right? So Clay and Apollo could be configured to get the data, publicly available data from social networks, from different public resources about a company and or a person or people who within the company, so that when you get to the conversations with the customers, you already have all of that information. It's validated and it actually matches with your ideal customer profile. Then, having the information is great, and building up the organic inbound work pipeline is also a goal for any organization. However, one of the most effective go-to-market strategies, leveraging AI into actually building up and increasing your outgoing campaigns, where you already know or potentially have a hypothesis about your ideal customer profile. And let's say you found a tool or tools that help you get information or a list of those potential prospects and leads. So you build up the lead information validation tool set, right? Be that Clay, Apollo, LinkedIn, any others. So you start building a list of the potential customers. Now you want to actually reach out to them, but you don't. But at the same time, you want to reach out to them not with the same either in email copy and paste, but in a personalized way and in the channel where they are actually sitting in. Meaning, if they don't read emails, there's no point of sending emails. If they're on LinkedIn, you would want to make sure that the LinkedIn is personalized and you're outreaching there, right? Jiva Instantly and other tools for outreach could help you to set up the processes and the flows where it's not just an email sequence, but you can build up an agent within those tools that will initiate the conversation in the channel where the leads is in, and then you can transition it into the actual conversation and scheduling. And you're not like, initially you need to have understanding of your customer and internal flow, how you would expect the whole conversion pipeline to work. And then you can configure those tools and build agents within those tools that will go step by step with the objective to get you qualified lead. They will send an email or they will send a message, then they'll reply with email and validate that the person meets your ICP or criteria, and they will try to convert it to schedule a demo with you. And at the end, you would not be sending any of those yourself, but those tools will do that. The important part in all of that is to have a feedback loop, is to look at the results and reconfigure and adjust. And always run A/B tests if possible and when possible. An A/B test is when you compare two different options and see the results, which one works better. Either if it's a messaging, either if it's a channel, or even within the same channel. But you always experiment to increase the metrics throughout that pipeline in the outreach. And lastly, which the obvious part, which seemed to be obvious part for some people, but a lot will actually forget about it, is it's not just setting up those workflows, but you want to ensure that you're building up your pipeline and you have ability to work with that pipeline of your potential customers, such as the CRM. Some CRMs are more progressive. They start building up and opening up the agentic protocols that allow those tools to work with the list, make changes to them, and help you to optimize the work with your lead generation, pretty much. Okay, this is the stack. There, again, not necessarily these tools. There's dozens for each objective, but you definitely can configure these as examples. What we've done in the last several for the last several customers. Okay, and moving forward, speaking about the organic growth. On the one hand, you would think, well, you can recognize if the material is not interesting enough and it's written by a machine. In reality, that's not the case. You would want to ensure that you leverage AI writing tools for your efficiency in the process. Okay, you draft and edit the content with a certain large language model that will help you accelerate the actual content creation, right? You augment it with a human for different channels because those will be different content per channel. But the thread would be pretty much common. You establish the process for content creation. This is, you're building up the incoming lead flow, right? Organic growth. And establishing the thought leadership with the leverage of different LLMs, such as ChatGPT or any others. There's, again, a lot of them out there. But then when you created the content, when you set up those forms on the website, you started connecting the dots. Sometimes people would think that getting that lead to read your content and get to the form and submit is everything that's needed, and all of a sudden, revenue is flowing in. That's definitely not the case. You want to ensure that there is a continuation to reaching the objective of scheduling the meeting and answering the questions from your prospects, right? So after the form is completed, you want to ensure that the workflow is completely set up for the next follow-ups, and you do have those in the working CRM active list. Those are which are qualified for you to follow up. Okay. And on the one hand, it sounds simple, and by the way, it is. But it is for those who've done those several times, right? You configure the email responses, you're routing within the CRM to the right list in the priority, you're adding different links and ensuring they're working, and if you promise to deliver different artifacts and value to those prospects and customers, you definitely should do that, and ensure that all of the tools are interconnected so they can deliver those artifacts even though they're dynamically changing or adding. And then at the end of the day, it's everything that you do as infrastructure for the business ultimately affects the way how the user feel the brand and the organization and the product. And either it works for the team. Sometimes the implementation of AI, we've had that customer as well. Somebody will heard about the buzzwords, start implementing every single AI tool out there, and at the end, it actually, instead of saving time or increasing certain efficiency within different processes, it will actually consume the time from the team. They won't be happy because they had to deploy something that was not needed at all. Because some of the process could be as simple as A and B, and you don't need to do anything with that. So assessing that before you do is critically important. Okay. At the end, I'll be happy to share with you the checklist, which you can actually validate what you have versus or how would you even check that. And I can go and dive deeper depending on the time. So I'm happy to give a kind of a quick, short pick on that checklist. Unless Tyler, you want to get into the Q&A first, and then
Yeah, let's jump into some Q&A and see if it drives us towards the checklist. So
okay.
if any of you have questions, I would say please put them in the chat. We can kind of queue up there. I'll kick things off as people are typing their questions in there. I put one in the chat with all of these AI tools that you're discussing here, Ilya.
Mm-hmm.
If you've already got a team member doing some of these things, what is the right background for someone to be driving the AI automation? So is it, if I'm going to automate something, is it better to have a marketer driving it and automate sales, or is it better to have a salesperson that automates marketing, or do you have suggestions otherwise?
That's a great question. There's several on that, but I'll try to touch base. And actually, I'll reference to the checklist because it's very relevant, right? So I'll step back a little bit, starting from the education, okay, and how big tech is looking into the talent. When I was growing up, for instance, right, I was focused in a specialty education. So I'm a specialist. That took me 6 years in the computer science, right? Right now, when you go through the education process here in the US, you're getting bachelor, and then you're actually specializing in the master's, and then you're even further specializing in postgrad, right? Where it leads is to build up very specific specialists in a very deep understanding in the domains in order to deploy something that is a general, which LLM is. like large language model learn through a lot of information out there. And answering that question is you either have a generalist who could solve the problem and get in very good at quick education on the subject and domain, because that way they can deploy multiple different tools, understanding the problem, learning through that process, and solving it. So generalists for those deployments are generally good. When you're trying to tackle complex issues, you would need to have somebody within domain expertise. I'll give you an example. We worked with a healthcare startup, and without understanding certain compliance regulations, you may follow best practices from from some tool that will tell you to go one, two, three, get that information here, and or ask a user or retrieve the information, learn about a particular end user. The challenge within the healthcare, for instance, if the person will just follow steps, they would not necessarily or may not necessarily know about hyperregulation, California. Like there is a certain privacy and or compliance regulations that you have to have as a context around that particular subject, right? So if you enable, on the one hand, data collection with starting from the form, and if it is a patient of yours, or for certain practice where the platform is taking the information from, there are certain rules applied. So you definitely have to have those domain specific knowledge. If it's more of a general deployment and the process, then generalist could deploy AI tool set within the organization, be that in the go-to-market, be that within the R&D and infrastructure and supply chain, doesn't really matter.
Okay. I think
And
that takes us into the next question from Rob. What's one AI tool you personally can't live without right now?
I would say it's not only one. We're so get used to it. Throughout, like, I personally use at least five on a daily basis and 10 times, 50 times a day. ChatGPT, Perplexity, those are the two that's just ingrained. Be that in the, in the company setting where um, after ChatGPT enabled certain connectors, how they call it, right? An API, you you let the tool know that this is our contacts, these are our documents, these are our customer base, right? And it helps you optimize a lot of things. On Perplexity side, it definitely, if you want to search or get deeper research and make it fast, Perplexity is a great tool to use it with the references to certain research papers with the links to them. You can pretty much get to the source. So those are the two tools that definitely top of mind.
Okay. A couple of questions from Arjun. Would you recommend using these tools for fundraising with the personalized outreach? And how can you ensure the lead data is updated and not corrupted?
100%. So those are actually again multiple questions, but the simple question: would you? I recommend. I 100% would recommend use tools for fundraising, building up your investor lists, right? Depending on the stage, by the way, though, too. If it's seed, you would not like it's a very narrow list, but you want to get as much information as possible, just angel investors or those who are focused on seed. So you curate that list, you update with a multiple times. If you are already familiar with how to build certain it's not an agent even, it's automated task within those LLMs, be that ChatGPT, Cloudy, or any other LLM that you use to, then I would like how that's proceeding to the next part of the question of how to use how to get the data that is not corrupt. You actually run that on a daily basis, and at the end of the day or at the end of the week, depending on subscription plan you have and so on and so forth. But you would definitely get the updated information on a frequently basis. And you curate that list. It doesn't necessarily have to be a tool if you're doing it in the early stages. It could be an Excel spreadsheet that you give access to. LLM, you configure LLM to write into that document and update the information if it's incorrect. And there's recently published or recently available confirmed data on a particular, not subject, but let's put it as a subject. So that's how I would ensure through LLM tools such as ChatGPT, like that the data on the active list. And by the way, that's that's a typical example how any organization will build the list for different campaigns, because essentially investor list that you curate and update on the periodically, that could be another list of a particular ICP pretty much, or ideal customer profile, that now it becomes not an investor but a product manager and the company of this type, and you update and curate that list very similarly how you would do with investors.
Awesome. Thank you. If you need more clarity on any of your questions, just you can come off mute or throw it in the chat. Ilya, if someone was starting from ground zero right after this meeting or this call, what are the next 1 to 3 steps, or the first 1 to 3 steps you would suggest they do?
I believe we'll be able to send this out right to the group who is interested.
Yes.
So and again, the question, I would go with the assumption that there's an idea around it, business around it, something, already meaningful, right? Not just an idea and I'm just starting off. Otherwise, some of these steps you will just skip, right? Depending on where you are in the journey, what you have or you don't have, you would pretty much calibrate with that list, okay? And it doesn't necessarily have to be 1, 2, 3. You can select any of them that are more relevant depending on your situation, right? If you already have some baseline in terms of your digital presence, in terms of your tool set that's already there, you assess that first, right? If you don't have the infrastructure or digital face yet, and you decide that you would need still the website as a basis of it, and then you connect the rest of the channels to it, then you will go there and validate that your website infrastructure is intact, right? You pretty much literally go one by one, and there are other things that could be relevant depending on the situation, but these are true for all of the customers that we worked with. Okay. So if assuming that you have some website and you're working on lead generation and the outreach, and you want to deploy those tools that could help you to power those lead enrichment or getting the information scrappers out of the resources, adding those, then sequencing certain events, you pretty much go one by one. Do I have that enabled? Do I have a tool for that? If I do, did I actually configure it properly so that I'm getting the information from those tools? What we see also, sometimes you subscribe for the tools, but you actually haven't get the value out of the tools because they haven't been configured properly. You're not getting the information about the leads. The sequences were set up initially, but they were not reconfigured or validated if they're actually executing and getting through the pipeline, right? Is the data out of those tools getting into my primary data set, be that a HubSpot or any other CRM or the database, Excel spreadsheet, doesn't really matter. But you want to ensure that those exist and you validate that it's working. If it's not, you go to the basics. You set up those that they're working, and then you're working with the data out as an output from those systems, right? And are those leads that you're generating through those either the tools or even the sequence processes, are they your personas? That's where you're actually adding the feedback loop and helping, stepping a little bit further, but you can adjust those configurations based on what you see as an output from the systems. Then you want to ensure that if you do have, and you decided the website is your face of the business, how is it set up? Is it set up for you to be future proof? Can you iterate on that very quickly without reliance on technical resources, on developers? Can it be low code, no code with proper configuration and the technical infrastructure? How is it loaded? Do you comply with certain practices on uh, be that accessibility, be that a mobile first, any others that are out there and relevant to you. Does my design follow certain best practices? Are my users getting confused in the process? So you pretty much literally go one by one and checking it up, right?
Yeah, this is awesome. Ilya, we're at time right now. If you're able to send this to Hannah, this checklist, we can distribute it out to all of the attendees. And
Hmm.
I would suggest if anybody would like to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
It's either through the website, through LinkedIn, ilyaozerets.com, on LinkedIn, Ozerets, bellchoice.com. Either of those resources will definitely give you help and answers. The one thing, though, that I will touch base here is about the AI driven content engine, because that's kind of important on using the tools, and that's we're expressing that typically very in detail. Is you cannot just use AI tool, okay? It is extremely important to leverage the tool to get the drafts for you. But it's very important to have the human touch to this, because the hallucinations happen, and you want to ensure it actually speaks to the users who are also humans. And
Yeah,
the humans prefer to read and understand what other people think experienced, even though if the sum of the body of it is getting out from the tool. So don't skip those checkbox. But for sure, I'll send it to Hannah so we can distribute it. Okay.
perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This was fantastic. Really appreciate everybody coming this week. And we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Ilya, thanks so much for your time and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much, Taylor. Thank you, everyone, for listening in, and feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks all. We'll see you next week.